Now joining us on the set is Nomi Prins, whose most recent book is It Takes a Pillage, Behind the Bailouts, Bonuses, and Backroom Deals from Washington to Wall Street. This was written in 2009. Nomi Prins, the Senate is currently working on financial regulation matters. What do you think about what the U.S. Senate is doing?
Well, I think they appear to be trying, but unfortunately, if you really dig into how banks operate, and I worked at them, and I've written extensively about them. Unfortunately, the financial reform package as it stands now, the bill that Senator Dodd has put forth so far, will really not get to the core of the kinds of risk that banks put into the general overall economy.
You say you used to work at banks. You used to be a managing director at Goldman Sachs.
Yes, I was.
And what does that mean to be a managing director? What did you work on?
Well, basically, I worked on the beginning of the credit derivatives, the CDOs, a portion of these toxic assets that blew up and blew out into the rest of the economy. When I worked on them, I left in 2002, they were predominantly made up of high yield or junk bonds. They weren't made up of the subprime loans and individuals' kind of homes beneath them that they ultimately came to be. But that's what Wall Street does. It takes a method. It takes like the crust of a pie, and then it fills it with different kinds of fillings as those become available, and makes money out of them.
Let's put up the numbers so we can get right to calls with Nomi Prins. It Takes a Pillage. 202 is the area code, 585-3885, East and Central time zones, 585-3886 if you live in the Mountain and Pacific time zones. Also, you can send her a tweet. We're checking our tweets, so you can, if you have a question via tweet, twitter.com/booktv is our Twitter address. Nomi Prins, you mentioned CDOs, collateralized debt obligations.
Yes.
Junk bonds. Where did all this stuff come from? I mean, why are we talking about that and not talking about profits and Econ 101? Where does Econ 101 fit into all this?
Well, that's a good question. The CDOs are these packages of weird things that became part of the public consciousness when the financial crisis happened in 2008, were really constructed back in the late 80s. Michael Milliken, the junk bond king, and Drexel Burnham Lambert, which disintegrated after that without a bailout. Important difference between that and a couple decades later. And what Wall Street does, what the bigger banks, the more speculative banks do, or in their speculative components of the big banks, is they say, all right, what can we stuff into and re-engineer and rejigger and everything else into new packages, wherever we call them. CDOs, it's just a name. And make money out of them by slicing them, dicing them, selling them, marketing them to little pension funds in Iowa, to little towns in Iceland, and basically take money up front, throw the risk out to the world, and not care about what happens to it. They are risk transfer products. They always were. And there's a lot of money to be made out of that.
Are they marketed that way? Is it all clear? And how regulated are they now?
They're not regulated securities. That's one of the problems with the market. Despite the problems it's had over the years, it is not regulated. There's no exchange that says, all right, well, here's the CDO, here's what's in it, here's what you can check, here's how it's trading on any given day. They're so tailor-made for that deal, for those clients, for those backers, each time they're created, that there isn't an exchange, there isn't regulation. Regulators are so far behind considering it. And even in these bills that have been proposed by the House and the Senate, there's nothing in there that really gets at making them more open. So almost anything goes. If you want to bet against the weather, and I want to bet for the weather, and we go to Goldman Sachs and say, do something, create something on both sides, Goldman will say, okay, well, I'll structure a piece of weather here in, Brazil, here in Africa, whatever, we'll stick it together, you take a bet, she'll take a bet, we'll make money on both sides. And that's really how it works.
Because they do the structuring.
They do the structuring, and they do the trading. They put it together, they sell it.
So is that what happened with John Paulson? He came to Goldman Sachs and said, hey, I want to put this package together, and I want to bet against it.
Yeah, for the most part, and most of that is perfectly legal within, unfortunately, the structure that we have.
Is it important Is it an important economic thing to do? Does it help the national economy in any way?
No, it is purely a betting mechanism. there's certainly no help that Paulson gave. Paulson took a bet that the housing market was going to go down. Frankly, at that point in time,
which is perfectly legitimate to do, correct?
It's legitimate to do. There were many writers, including myself, who thought there were problems with the market and things were looking too good to be true. So that in itself wasn't the problem. The problem was that he came to Goldman and he said, I want to do this structure. I want to select the things that you're going to buy from me, but I'm going to bet against you. And so that's kind of, again, sort of legal, because the fact that I'm betting against you, you're still taking the bet on your side. You shouldn't care that I am betting against you. The problem comes in, and the SEC charge is going to try to get to, should Goldman have disclosed to someone who bought part of that deal that Paulson, not that he was on the other side, they don't have to disclose that, but that he selected some of the securities and was on the other side, that he was a part of the selection process, which was not disclosed in the marketing materials. And that's going to be where the case is going to hinge.
It takes a pillage. Nomi Prins, first call up for her, comes from Richmond, Virginia. Good afternoon, Richmond. Please go ahead with your question.
Hey, I just wanted to ask, with the huge bailout, is there a danger with that of a devaluation of the currency through inflation or whatever?
Well, I think that, the currency question is good. A lot of people want to know if any of these problems will affect the dollar, and so far they haven't, and part of the reason why is because all these assets, all of the transactions, all of the marketing was very global. So problems that happened on one side that might have emanated from the United States, where most of the manufacturing of these assets were taking place, and most of the bailout and the subsidies to fix the market were given out, there's still impacts across the world from having been involved in those products. So, technically, the dollar shouldn't remain as strong by virtue of the fact that we have and have continued to hold so much money behind these assets without really knowing where they went. They didn't disappear. A lot of them still exist. They're on books. They're being marked in different ways, but that was exactly how we got into this problem. So having money behind them, having debt accumulate behind them, having the Fed put out a lot of money behind them only works when we can pretend they're still valuable or they've become valuable again. The moment that becomes less clear is when we have more problems with the currency, even though it's been a globalized problem, I think.
Norco, California. Good morning to you. Please go ahead. Norco, California.
Really important, and I think Americans are beginning to figure out that Congress and the country is really being run by these big money cartels. They even bankrupted Greece and Iceland with these studios and the like. Who, with them embedded in the government every term, who can come against this cartel? And I heard the money's going to crash this year. At the end, at the library, all these sites say the dollar's going to crash. Did you hear anything about that? Thank you very much.
Well, as I mentioned to the other question, whether the dollar crashes or not really depends on whether we get another revelation that indicates that a lot of these assets really aren't worth what the Fed and banks are saying they are worth, which is not impossible. I don't believe they're worth what either of those entities say they're worth. And we do have a problem. We have a problem that Wall Street, and certainly the senior managers and CEOs of Wall Street have an incredibly tight relationship with Washington. CEO of Goldman Sachs now, Lloyd Blankfein, and the firm is being charged by the SEC. At the same time, has had many meetings with Obama. There are continued reports before that of CEOs having meetings with the White House, with the Treasury Secretary. The Treasury Secretary was involved in, Tim Geithner was involved in an enormous portion of the bailout and the subsidization of the banking industry without requiring any rules be changed, without putting any strings attached to not just the TARP money, but all of the bailout money, the Fed loans, the guarantees, all this stuff, all these gifts that were given to Wall Street. And that the tight relationship between the people, the real personal relationships, is definitely a problem. I don't know how we fix it. I think we people have to continue to be, really pissed off, really angered, really vigilant about what we think of these relationships, in our votes, in our comments, and everything else, because it's not going to change by itself.